Welcome back to the program. Well, it's the final segment, and we're talking about space, the final frontier. And this week, NASA has discovered a new Earth-sized planet which could support human life. Joining me now is astrophysicist and cosmologist Brad Tucker to explain it all. Brad, this all sounds very interesting, a bit futuristic, possibly a bit pie in the sky, if not planet in the sky. Tell us about this discovery. Do we have new neighbors?
So look, whether the neighbors want us there or not, we don't know yet. But this exoplanet definitely now does exist in terms of confirmation from the James Webb Space Telescope. Now, we don't really know that much about it yet. All we know is that it's relatively the same size as Earth. It's about 99% the mass of the Earth. It orbits a star much closer than we orbit our own star. So 1 year is every 2 Earth days. But because that star is really small, what we call the habitable zone, the zone where you can essentially have hot and cold, and it's not too hot, not too cold, you can have liquid water, is doable. And then at the same time, it may then be able to host life. Now, we don't know if there's life there. That's going to be the next big question. And you're right. I don't think we'll be making any plans to really go there anytime soon. But because this is still relatively nearby, it's something we can follow up with more telescopes and actually understand, is there life on it, or is there an atmosphere at least like Earth?
And when you say relatively nearby, I mean, do you mean sort of the next suburb over, or, across the country? How far, sort of in space terms, are we talking about here?
Yeah, look, in space terms, this is kind of the neighboring suburb almost. So, anything within 100 light years, like this one, we get really excited by. Given our galaxy alone is 100,000 light years across, and some galaxies are billions of light years away, this is relatively nearby. And this is, by being relatively nearby, there's only a handful of stars this close, means that we can use telescopes that then can measure those atmospheres. But even as a pipe dream in the distant future, we could think about building a probe that can potentially go there and image it. Now, again, it'll take a while, but that's not out of the realm of possibilities in the next generation or so.
And then also just sort of closer to home now, there does seem to be, and I'm a layman at all of this, but I do get the sense that there's more of a push by China, by people in the U.S., by people like Elon Musk, to start to figure out ways that we can start to live off of this planet closer to home. Are we in the middle of a new space race? Is it about commercial stuff, military stuff, the future of humanity? Where is this all taking us?
Yeah, look, it's kind of a bit of all of the above. I think it's a fair point because we've seen a new space race that is very different from the one in the 60s, right? In the 60s, it was about the moon, and it was very clear there was 2 racers, the U.S. And the USSR. Now there's so many different competitors. Yes, there's China, but China is also working with Russia. The U.S. is leading a number of countries and its Artemis program, but you also have the private companies going their own way, like SpaceX and Elon Musk, and even Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos. So, and there's also not one endpoint, right? So right now the race is the moon, and if you can get to the moon and operate there, then it's to go to Mars. And then maybe if it's Mars, it's even further afield. And so a lot of this is commercial in nature. Can we find resource to use, for instance, in space on the moon, for instance, or on Mars even? Then there's also the military aspects. And we're already seeing this come into play again in these alliances that are forming. In fact, 2 days before Russia invaded the Ukraine, 5 countries, the US, UK, Australia, and a few others, formed essentially a space alliance that said, we are going to defend the rules and order of space. And this was purely much to counteract China and Russia agreeing to work together on moon bases. And the one thing when we look at China is not to underestimate, they are moving rapidly fast, even faster than the US and Russia did in the 60s. They are spending a lot of money and therefore a lot of people. And so when they're saying deadlines of, we're going to finish at the end of this year or next year, they're meeting those deadlines. It's not shifting 2, 3, 5, 10 years. They're on time with what they say.
And I think I saw something by somebody at the Space Force today or yesterday saying that indeed they need to seriously amp up their speed of acquisition, of developing their programs to compete. I mean, is that the case? Is this sort of like, well, the old space race during the Cold War when Russia put a craft into orbit before the U.S., and that kicked off everything we saw in that wonderful movie, The Right Stuff, and, put American ingenuity on track. Is that happening here now again?
A bit, yeah. And it's also not even just China as well. One of the things that we've seen is just how big commercial sectors have played in ground wars, namely in Ukraine. We've seen how big SpaceX Starlink internet service, Maxar's telecommunications and imaging satellites have played to actually keep Ukraine essentially in the war. And so what we're seeing now is that the way the commercial space sector interacts here on Earth, and then the way countries are interacting in space, this is essentially why Space Wars existed. I think a lot of people thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. In fact, Obama actually even proposed it about a decade ago, but everyone said, we're not quite ready yet. And then when we saw China really get into gear, the U.S. kind of said, yeah, we kind of have to do this. Australia has followed suit, so has Japan and France and the UK, you name it, because of just how big space is playing a role in space and on Earth.
Brad Tucker, that's absolutely fascinating. Very quickly, is there a problem with all of these sort of things in space crashing into each other?
We do have that slight worry with the buildup of satellites and what we call Kessler syndrome, i.e. so much junk floating around you can pollute it. It's actually positively the one issue everyone works on together because it affects everyone equally. So in some ways we get some cooperation there because everyone can be up a creek without a satellite.
Fantastic. Brad Tucker, thanks so much. We're going to have to leave it there.